Chapter 17. So. What you are saying is that there is some power missing? Ratchet had a thoughtful frown on his metallic face, arms crossed pensively as he carefully listened to Kakashi's every word. The copyman nodded. I know my limits and I know my recovery speed. I don't have a great deal of chakra, but I certainly have enough to carry out a bit of fighting after a week of rest and recovery. I should have had more chakra by the fight with the Decepticons. I was weaker than I should have been and it took me by surprise, hence the whole captured ordeal. He was sitting up on the bed, finally back in his proper ninja clothes. It felt nearly ridiculously good to be once more wearing the sandals, rather miraculously still in his possession, the jounin trousers and a long-sleeved black shirt that greatly resembled his jounin shirt, that had been rendered useless by Mrs. Darby who had pretty much cut it to pieces when tending to his wounds. Still, it was much better than the horrible big gray one that had been more like a pajama than a proper shirt, or a tent. Anyway, he was in the middle of an important conversation here, and it was no place to reminiscence old pieces of clothing. And something Naruto said only verified it. He spoke of the cube eye, and how he was lucky to snap out of it because he noticed I was gone and because the demon apparently wasn't recovered as much as it should have been. Ratchet was nodding slowly. So both of you should have recovered by that time, but neither had the chakra that you should have had. That can't be a coincidence. No, it cannot. Naruto just didn't notice it as easily in the battle because he has much more chakra to begin with. Well, could it be that it's just recovering more slowly? Kakashi shook his head. I don't know why it would be like that. Chakra is produced within the body, and we are rather well, so there would be no reason for that. Ratchet hummed pensively. So some of your chakra is missing. Yes. What an uncomfortable thought. Kakashi frowned. Chakra was their very life force. It was very worrying to have a part of it just disappear. Could it be because of the attack you were trying to stop that then led you here? Kakashi lifted his eyebrow. So Naruto did tell you about that? He told about the chakra, yes. And the techniques you use. And your eye. The medic was smiling lopsidedly. We must discuss about those more, Kakashi-san, if you are fine with that. As a scientist there is just too much new information for me to ignore. The copyman chuckled a bit wearily. Sure thing. He was a bit proud of Naruto for managing to explain something as foreign as chakra to the Autobots. And he couldn't even bring himself to be annoyed with his student's decision to come clean about their ninja secrets. It wasn't like there was much room for secrecy anymore. The Autobots had been doing everything in their power to aid him and his student. He could at least be honest with them in return. But to answer your question, no, I don't think it was it. I cannot be sure, of course, as I don't know exactly what kind of attack it was. I certainly hope it wasn't the type to reduce our chakra permanently. He shuddered at the thought before shaking his head. No, it couldn't have been that. He would have heard of such technique before if it was, and certainly wouldn't have had it thrown at his face by some unknown mediocre jounin in the middle of nowhere. Well, we'll have to think about that later, Ratchet mused. Then to other things, what do you think caused you to get here in the first place? Kakashi ran a hand through his hair, leaving it even messier than usual, if possible. I really don't know. I didn't even know that the Sharingan was capable of this sort of thing. The Kamui technique is able to teleport objects into a different dimension, but I hadn't imagined things like traveling into different dimensions with different worlds could be done. Well, I would dare to say that most of what we are capable of holds much more potential than we could ever imagine, Ratchet said. Great and terrible things can be achieved when the limits we have thought as unbreakable are breached. I think this is the case with humankind here, there in your world, as well as with my own race. Kakashi nodded solemnly. If the incident could be replicated and used. Only Kami knew what would happen then. So it doesn't have to be a solid theory, Ratchet said, shrugging. Just what do you think happened? Well, guess he'd really have to go by gut feeling, then. I cannot be sure of course, but I have some suspicions. He shifted a bit, taking a better position on the bed. It could have been an experimental technique that didn't quite work as it should have, or just worked unexpectedly when encountering the Sharingan. Maybe when I tried to get rid of it with my Kamui it reacted and amplified the teleportation to the point that it snatched Naruto and me with it, as we were the closest ones to it, and brought us very much farther than it should have. Then, on the way, so to speak, its power burned through and out. Along with your powers, Ratchet said in understanding. It's well possible, at least it seems to me. Of course I don't know much about the theory of chakra or its uses. Kakashi shrugged. Well, it's just a thought. There's very little we can actually do to verify it, apart from finding out what that jutsu was. I didn't see the Jounin cast it, so I cannot copy it. And maybe knowing it wouldn't really help us at all anyway. Ratchet nodded. I understand. I think that your appearance here was a rather large stroke of luck and coincidence, if you hadn't heard of such things happening before. I doubt we should just try to recreate the coincidence and instead work a different route for you to return through. There may well be other channels to your dimension. Hopefully you're right. Kakashi massaged his temples with one hand, frowning. I think the foreign technique probably had more to do with making my Kamui unpredictable than bringing in much force of its own. Naruto has vast reserves of chakra on his own as well as the massive power of the fox, all that put together, and the Kamui threw us as far as it could. Oh, this was all making his head ache. That actually doesn't sound at all bad. Ratchet glanced at his computers. But still, unfortunately there isn't much solid data to go by. So I cannot promise anything grand here, but I'll try to work something out. Thank you, Ratchet, Kakashi said, feeling gratefulness rise in his chest. I really appreciate that. It is no problem, my pleasure really. Ratchet smiled. I'll do my best to have something ready soon. The white redneck left for his computers and Kakashi was left to sit on the bed. The same hospital bed he was beginning to very much despise. Mrs. Darby had strongly insisted, some might even say threatened, for him to stay in bed for the day. But Kakashi had never been that good at listening doctor's advice. He tugged up his left sleeve and examined the bruises. They had changed from angry red into blue and purple mist circling around his arm. There were a couple of places where the skin had broken and was still irritated and healing. You never said where you got those bruises from. RC's nonchalant voice came from behind him. Kakashi sighed. What was with the blue Autobot now wanting to talk with him? Not that RC hadn't changed, her behavior becoming much less suspicious towards him lately. But still, Kakashi hadn't anticipated for her to talk to him quite so much on her own volition. Well, Kakashi couldn't really blame her for her earlier distrust. He too would have been dubious if peculiar strangers with secrets had suddenly dropped in the middle of Konoha. Still, it didn't tell him why the robot had suddenly started gravitating to him every now and then without questioning whether he had some malicious plan he was trying to carry out. Chains tend to leave a mark after a while, he said, tugging down the sleeve so it once more hid the nasty bruises. At least they were aching less and less. He was on the road to recovery, as Mrs. Darby had rather dryly said. What a funny expression, he had thought. RC let out an affirming noise. It was neither a blasé nor a sympathetic sound, and it was okay with Kakashi. He was fine and would recover swiftly, there really was no reason for anyone to worry. That they have, she agreed, crossing her arms. She wasn't looking at him, instead gazing at the base. Kakashi followed her eyes and he too for a moment watched Naruto talk animatedly with Maiko, Jack, and Raph. He was apparently telling about some great adventure of his, going by Maiko's exited no way. And Jack's and Raph's incredulous looks. RC shook her head, smiling a bit. Then her eyes shifted to Kakashi. Although I must say they look much worse on you humans. Skin seems like a very uncomfortable and impractical choice of protection. Well, it has its uses. I certainly hope so. Kakashi shrugged. It might look nasty for a while, but it's usually not that bad. And it will heal. Yes. RC was still gazing at the teenagers before sighing. Kakashi sensed that there were words about to come and waited patiently for the Autobot to voice them. It's just distressing to witness it firsthand, she said slowly. We haven't really dealt much with human injuries, fortunately. We obviously try to keep the kids out of everything truly dangerous, but they are stubborn and sometimes end up in places they have no business to be. She shook her head. Compared to us, you humans are vulnerable with all that flesh and bones. It was a harsh reminder to see your injuries and remember the same could happen to them if we're not careful. She nodded towards the teenagers who were now all laughing together. And they are just children after all. Kakashi nodded in understanding. How did you meet them in the first place? He asked out of curiosity and in an effort to steer the conversation away from such dark themes. RC snorted. That's a funny one. It was really a coincidence after another coincidence. Tried to scare them off a bit but they wouldn't have it and they just came to befriend us, I guess. Kakashi chuckled. Sounds like a good story. It is. The Jounin watched as the teenagers busied themselves with the games they had introduced Naruto to. Soon they were all laughing and cheering and overall making terrible ruckus. He found he was smiling slightly. I understand your concern though. It is not a nice feeling to have such great forces after someone you want to protect. Even if they were rather powerful themselves. From the corner of his lone eye he saw RC glance at him. So Megatron really is planning something? Kakashi nodded grimly. Said it to my face, actually. And he was all arrogantly confident about it. Like there was nothing I could do about it. There's always something we can do about things. RC said quietly. That's why the other team is always trying to stop us from even attempting. Oh, I know that, the Jounin said, a small smile behind his mask. I have no intention on letting anything happen to Naruto. I might have been careless in the last fight. I won't be again. And if Megatron thought he'd be easy to capture and use against Naruto, he was dead wrong. He wasn't going to get caught again and he wouldn't give the Decepticon Lord a chance to get to Naruto through him. It would never happen. Just recover a bit before rushing into that next fight, RC muttered. I won't come and save your hide another time. I'll keep that in mind, RC-san. There was a short silence between them. Well, as silent as it could be when the kids were making all that clamoring. So, RC said, you really did have the superpowers Maiko suspected you to have all along. Kakashi groaned at the term. They are really not superpowers. Kami, what had Naruto told them? To them they really are, the Autobot chuckled. Maiko will soon be pestering you all the time about them. Great, Kakashi muttered. He didn't have anything against the kids, not really. They, especially Maiko, could just be a bit much sometimes, a bit too much. I hope you understand why we kept it a secret, RC-san, he said, one hand rubbing the back of his neck absently. His arm twinged at the movement but he ignored it. Oh, I understand. I might not be happy about it, but I realize why you deemed it necessary. Her blue eyes twinkled a bit, and Kakashi couldn't figure out whether she was really annoyed or not, just like you kept it secret that you learned English in a week, Hatake. I didn't learn all of it. Enough, I'd say. Kakashi rolled his eye. Well, yes, I did. Sorry about that. But I am a ninja. We are supposed to keep secrets. Well, it's annoying, so please refrain from it in the future, Hatake-san. Kakashi laughed. I'll do my best. It was only late in the evening when Ratchet finally called them all to the computers. The kids had been once more removed from the base, carried off by Bulkhead who had just returned back to the base. The medic was nearly exhausted by the day's work. He had totally become absorbed with his current task, inspecting old readings and searching for data buried deep within the archives. He had nearly lost patience with the insufferable human technology, but fortunately Raphael had been there to aid him a little. Just a bit, mind you. He still wasn't sure if he had made enough progress, not just during this particular day. He had been working on this nearly the whole week, after all, with limited knowledge though, but at least he thought he had gotten somewhere. He straightened his posture as the rest of the team, along with Naruto and Kakashi, gathered around the computers. The humans were standing on the upper level, evening out the height differences a bit. Kakashi stood with his hands in his pockets, still looking a bit pale and shaky but at least standing. Naruto was leaning his elbows against the railing, looking enthusiastic and impatient. "So Doc," Wheeljack asked with his usual annoying smirk. "Have you reinvented the science already and found a way to pop open a door to other dimensional neighborhood?" Ratchet frowned at him. "Would you for once take something seriously, Wheeljack?" "This is my serious face, sunshine." "Quit it, you two," RC snapped, as if Ratchet too had perpetrated in Wheeljack's nonsense. Prime turned to him, delicately steering the conversation back on track. "Have you found something out, Ratchet?" The medic nodded. "I certainly hope so. As you know," he began the long explanation, "there wasn't much data to go by here. There is only one precedent, and even that isn't the best base to start solving a problem like this. I can't promise even remotely solid theories." "So are you saying there's practically nothing you have gotten together?" Smokescreen's obnoxious voice came up. Ratchet resisted the urge to throw something very solid at the rookie's head. "What I'm saying," he said rather emphatically, "is that there wasn't a beginner's guide to dimensional travel lying around anywhere where I could check the factors." He calmed himself and carried on the real explanation. "Anyway, I fortunately got some facts to back me up. I spoke with Hitakeson and he confirmed the teleportation technique he possesses. He also told me his suspicions about how this all came to happen, about the other, unfamiliar force colliding with it that possibly strengthened or altered the teleportation. I am not sure what it truly caused," Kakashi said, crossing his arms. "It could have made it unstable, snatching up me and Naruto and burning up our chakra and throwing us as far as it could. The Kyuubi's powers are vast after all, as well as Naruto's." Ratchet nodded at the ninja's words. "And that brings us to the next fact, apparently some of their power got lost on the way, so to speak." Naruto was nodding vigorously. "The fox should have been stronger. And even Sensei doesn't usually faint that easily." "Ow, Kakashi-sensei, that hurt." Ignoring their antics, Ratchet carried on now that he had just gotten on a good roll. "I also checked the old data from the computers, from the day you arrived. At first I thought the energy we detected in the desert when you arrived was quite ground bridge-like. Not in focused detail, of course, but still there were some similarities." He hit the keys and brought up more data that filled the displays in long strings of text and numbers. He saw Naruto, and Kakashi, watching it with frowns on their faces. "The data from the Shadow Zone incident is even more similar. And here's what I found out. More tapping at the keyboard and more data ran through the displays. I really hope you're going to clarify a bit, Doc. If you'd wait a click or two, Wheeljack, you would find out I would. The Shadow Zone was breached when two ground bridges were feeding off each other at the same time, at the same coordinates. That's why the children didn't end up here when entering the portal, but rather a different plane of existence and dimension. So watch the catch? I think the power to really break our world's four-dimensional walls is greater than what two ground bridges at the same coordinates can generate," Ratchet said. "Which means something happened that allowed mass to pass through a shortcut of sorts into a place farther away than any enforced or double ground bridge or space bridge on the matter could ever reach." Kakashi was nodding slowly. "I think I see what you mean, but that helps us how?" "I think," the medic said, "that it might be a way for you to return home." Naruto blinked. "What, jump into that shadow thing?" "Not just that." Ratchet looked at Kakashi. "Could you use your teleportation skill here too?" "I don't see why not," Kakashi said slowly. "But there's still the problem with the missing power. Even if we use the shortcut to get farther away from this dimension, I don't think even our combined chakra could be enough to reach home." "That might not be such an issue," Ratchet said. "I think the power didn't just disappear. I think it's still there, keeping up the connection and directing you home if you just have enough power to reach it and get a bit closer to it, to put it simply." RC was shaking her head, frowning. "How can you be so sure? It would be a great risk, To just jump to Primus knows where and hope there's something there that's not just empty space. Naruto shuddered at her words, looking a bit spooked. I told you it's not anything too solid, Ratchet said, frustration creeping to his voice. It's a wobbly theory, but it's all I could think of. It makes at least some sense. It could work, Kakashi said with a distant tinge to his voice. Chakra doesn't just disappear, and I'm not sure if Kamui is supposed to be used for such great distances. You might be right. And I would probably feel if the power was there or not if I tried to get home. A pause. At least, I'm rather sure. Well, might be right was probably the closest he could get to a proper theory with the tools he currently had. It would be logical to at least some degree, he admitted, and it's the best we have right now. Okay then, Naruto said, leaning to the railing. So, in English or Japanese, what are we gonna do then? We, Ratchet said, are going to reenact the Shadow Zone. Bumblebee beeped and chirped. Bee's right, Bulkhead said. How are we going to trick the cons into that? Ratchet shrugged. It's not that complicated. We'll stage some activity somewhere, have some of us stationed there. When the Decepticons fire up the bridge, I'll get the coordinates and do the same. Prime looked grim. That will demand great precision and speed. It would be a matter of seconds to get to one of the portals. I can do it, Ratchet said confidently. So can we. Naruto declared. Ninjas are faster than you can imagine. We'd get there in time. The boy probably wasn't exaggerating much, because the older ninja beside him was nodding at his words. He's right. We can do it. Just take us there when we've recovered once more and we'll be alright. RC was frowning. It still sounds terribly risky. Of course it's risky, RC-san. But we have to do it to get home. There was a solemn silence after the ninja's words. We'll make preparations, then, Wheeljack said. Doc can take care of the science stuff. We can come up with a distraction. I'll be back in action in a week or so, Kakashi said. Shouldn't take longer than that. It is settled then, Prime said, his voice heavy. He turned to look at Kakashi and Naruto, who straightened their postures under the leader's gaze. Are you sure you are ready for this? You can take longer to prepare and let Ratchet do more research if you so wish. Thank you, really, Kakashi said seriously, but we will be ready. And we shouldn't linger, not when Megatron is scheming in the background, and anything could be happening back home. Optimus bowed his head. I understand. Well then, Wheeljack said, clapping his servos together. Soon we'll get some more action, then. Smokescreen too seemed to be rather enthusiastic, and Naruto's eyes were gleaming. Ratchet suppressed a sigh. He was surrounded by ruffians. What a day! Naruto exclaimed as he threw himself onto the makeshift bed in the room that had become theirs. It really was a rather good bed. When carrying out long missions you usually had to sleep in the most uncomfortable places you could imagine. Here it was warm and dry and blankets, so Naruto found nothing he could complain about. Truly, Kakashi-sensei said a bit dryly, walking to the steel table. He removed his Hittite, carefully placed it on the table and touched it with the tips of his fingers. Then he left it there and sat down cross-legged on his own bed. I thought all that science talk was going to burst my brain, Naruto complained, lying on his back on the bed with his arms and legs pointing into different directions, taking up as much space as he could. It was just so comfy. It was all rather advanced, Sensei admitted. He reached for his Jounin vest by the wall, and the kunai holster that had laid beside it. From the holster he dug out one of his remaining kunais, and the vest gave up sharpening tools. Soon the soft sound of metal being sharpened filled the room. But it's enough that we'll know what to do when the time comes. Yeah. Because you'll be doing all the work, Naruto huffed rebelliously. He'd be just tagging along, or so he felt like. Kakashi-sensei smirked behind his mask, Naruto was sure. And you'll be a great sidekick. Naruto kicked at the blankets and grumbled. There was silence for a moment, only broken by the sounds of Sensei taking care of his weapons one by one. I'm really sorry about the Kyuubi, you know, Naruto said. Kakashi sighed. I know. It wasn't your fault. You were stupid, but Kyuubi is nothing you can do much about now. Yeah. Sucks. It does. Sensei put his weapons away again and turned to face him, face all serious. The scar over the Sharingan looked particularly nasty today. I am sorry too, his teacher said, for not being careful enough, and forcing you to a situation that the Kyuubi was bound to surface in. It wasn't your fault either, Sensei. Guess you're right. Kakashi-sensei was smiling slightly behind the cloth mask if the crinkles in the corners of his eyes told anything. Maybe I was being stupid too. Naruto snickered. Yeah, probably. You know, Naruto, that I'm not that easy to take out, Sensei said, and Naruto's eyes snapped to meet his teacher's lone one. This was a weird and possibly very important conversation, he decided, and he was still lying on the floor like a starfish. He shortly considered sitting up, but in the end didn't want to move from the comfortable position. Well, you were unconscious and lying in a puddle, he pointed out. Kakashi-sensei chuckled wearily. I probably was, he said. But our chakra levels won't take me by surprise again. The cons won't do it either. We'll both be fine. So don't worry. Sure, Sensei, Naruto said and blinked, frowning a little. A really weird conversation. What's this all about? Nothing, Naruto. The Jounin got up and went to the light switch. It's late. Get to sleep. The room fell into darkness and Naruto got under the covers. It took him a bit longer than usual to fall asleep. Weird. Well, that's the ending of that chapter. I do hope you enjoy this video. If you like to see more, remember to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment down below. Until next time.